Aloha everyone, welcome to another RuneScape news coverage video. For this video, we're going to take a further look at the player avatar refresh that we can expect to come out later this year. So without any further ado, let's jump right into the video. Let's go.
Cats is the illest. What you talking about, Willis?
Alright guys, all this information going forward is from the latest live stream, where they did go into further detail and showed us more progress towards the player avatar refresh. Now starting off, they are beginning to enter the production phase, where they're going to take a deeper dive into solidifying what will be the final build. An important thing to note going forward is that there will be only one body type. You can't choose to be a skinny or fat character. What they're making is what they're going to get. If they had created all those different types of body types that players want, it would very exponentially increase the amount of work needed to produce it, and ultimately would significantly lengthen the release date to a point where it's very likely we wouldn't even get it this year, maybe not even next year. So that's one of the reasons why we're only getting one body type. Now with the body type that they chose, it is important to keep this in mind when you're thinking about why they made decisions that they're making. So they wanted to go with an athletic build that is representative of all the things that the player avatar is capable of, what you would expect somebody who can do those things would look like physically. Somebody who can hunt down giant dinosaurs, do battle with 80-foot rock monsters, and even be capable of traversing the side of a cathedral, climbing mountainsides on a regular basis. So that's why they've opted for both the female and male characters to have a build that looks both athletic and powerful. So going forward, I'll show you a side-by-side with what they have done since the last time we saw them a month ago, taking in feedback from both players and internally to ultimately shape the builds into what conforms to what I just talked about in terms of the goals for the body shapes of these characters. It is subtle, but if you look back and forth, you'll notice some of the differences. Mainly what they've done is they have bulked up the female character slightly and toned down the male character. So previously there was a pretty stark difference in the builds where the male character looked much more bulky and much more strong, and the female character smaller and frail. Now I think they hit a decent balance where they both look pretty strong and pretty sturdy builds without losing much of the characteristics of masculinity and femininity. A lot of people on stream have said that they think the female character looks a little too muscular. I personally disagree. Could be that I'm biased. I have been into fitness my entire life, so I have seen females with this build on a regular basis, and to me it does not at all look masculine. I've seen female bodies that look very masculine, and I've seen them often, but considering the types of things that you know that the player avatar has achieved or will achieve depending on where you are in your RuneScape journey, I think this body type is very indicative of the kinds of physical strains and activity that the World Guardian does on a regular basis. Let me know if you disagree, but I don't think at all it looks masculine. I think it looks very realistic within the female body form, but if enough people do not like it, it's not so far in development that things can't change. So if you're really opposed to it, still give your feedback. Now another thing that's very important when giving your feedback is to pay attention that even though this is a new model refresh, they are still using the old rig. So there are certain points in terms of the proportions that are fixed and cannot be changed. One of those being the arm length, for example. In order for that to be changed, they'd need to create an entirely new rig, which would not work with the thousands of animations that they have in-game, and those would all need to be reworked. Again, significantly increasing production time, which has led them to using this approach. So do keep that in mind when you give your feedback. A lot of these proportions cannot be changed. Next up, briefly, I just want to show what it looks like with the blacksmith armor on both models. I personally think if you are somebody who does feel like the female character is a little too muscular, to me, the outfits when they're worn does alleviate that pretty significantly. You might disagree. agree, but I do feel like it does seem to hide away some of that musculature, and ultimately most of us are going to be wearing armor or some kind of outfit override, again making it seem like, to me, the body type isn't that much of an issue. Now, having said that, I want to shift on over to specifically the hands, because a lot of people have had a problem with that. They do look oversized, or they did last month, so it was a big concern for many people. Keep in mind, as I said earlier, that they are still using the old rigs, so they very much have to conform to a lot of the old proportions as well. That said, they have done what they can to slim down the hand as much as possible, and I do feel like it has alleviated it somewhat. If you're looking at the old hands, all we really had was like a thumb, a pointer finger, and then basically a flap that represented the last 3 fingers. Now we're getting all 5 of our fingers, but again, it has to still conform to that old rig. So there's only so much they can do with downsizing the hands. They might still slightly look maybe a little too big, but as I said, they did what they could to try to size it down, and I think ultimately after we have this in our hands and we've played it for a while, I think most of us are going to get used to it, and it's not going to feel like it's that much of a problem. Moving on, I want to now touch on the player Chathead. This is probably the biggest work in progress so far, so things are going to look very janky, just keep that in mind, but you can see it being animated here. It's pretty hilarious, almost nightmarish, if I'm being honest, but just to give you a feel for what's going on as far as the Chathead is concerned. Once again, there's not really a whole lot to say about this because it is still very early and we'll have to wait and see how it progresses. They do have a priority list in terms of facial expressions that they are going to work on the most, focusing on the ones that appear most frequently and trying to nail those as much as possible, and then work down the list from there. That doesn't mean the ones at the bottom of the list won't get touched or won't have models or anything like that, but they do want to make sure to pay extra attention to those that are more frequent facial expressions. Next thing that was showed off is some of the hairstyles. You can see clearly in these videos that they are much more detailed. The hair itself has much more volume and ultimately conforms better to not only the character but how you would expect it to react in the real world. You also get a great example of the dragon hairstyle, which kind of looks like Super Saiyan 3, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I think the hairstyles are looking great. I really have no negatives to say about them whatsoever, so let's move on. Next up, we have a couple of examples of some of the other outfits that are going to be launched with this update. They are still very much work in progress, more so than the blacksmith outfit that we've seen earlier, but just to give you an example of the graphical fidelity that you can expect with these updates, how you can see the different types of cloth interacting with other materials, how you see layers of the outfits really breaking up the form and shape. And ultimately, as I said earlier, most of us are going to be wearing these kinds of outfits, so you're not going to see a lot of the athletic or bulkier build that you've seen with the unclothed model. So again, do keep that in mind. The last thing I want to touch on is actually showing the models in game. So you see you have here both the male and female character with the blacksmith outfit actually rendered in game side by side. You can compare and get a feel with what it would actually look like when this launches. Personally, I think they look great. I think it's an excellent addition to the game. It's a vast improvement over the current models that we have for both male and female characters. And I am very excited to see this come out to the final game, as well as getting the chance to potentially customize my character differently. Again, this is still very much work in progress, and they are taking on all forms of feedback, but as progression ramps up and they get further into the project itself and closer to release dates, there are less pivots that they can take. So any strong disagreements you have with what they've done so far, it's way better to voice it now as opposed to later, because by then it might be way too late for them to implement the change that you want. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this update. I'm looking very forward to it as a whole and looking forward to the next sneak peek whenever that may be, and I'll cover it here on the channel when it comes out. Let me know what you guys think about anything discussed in this video down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to wrap it up there. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed yet and you want to stay up to date on all things RuneScape related, hit that subscribe button. Anyways, I appreciate you watching. I am out. Aloha.